So I thought it was interesting because I know you go by Sri M or M, and I liked, I think you made a comment one time that you've mentioned one M, which is, yes, the second one is the name given to you by
Madhukarnath.
Yes, and then the third is it Manav?
Manav, which means a human being.
Yes.
Oh, you remember so well. We met only for half an hour last time.
That's how I do these things. I have to remember these things. But I think that's interesting because ultimately, when you accept that you're just another traveler and another human being, it keeps you from your own ego getting
grounded.
Yes, yes.
Be grounded.
Yes, but I think that is important because you see some people who want to be surrounded by people who glorify them, and I think there are some, if you will, gurus who accept this because it is helpful for some people that they see them in this manner. But I think that it's like the person who likes to be surrounded by people who tell them how important they are and how smart they are, similar to our president. Versus, I would like to believe, and I hope that I was trying to surround myself with people who are smarter and people who actually confront you, because that's, I think, the place where you learn the most.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. In fact, I think in some of the textbooks on the religious practices in India, like the Gita and so on, they lay a stress on treating praise and blame as equal and not getting caught up. Because if you keep praising somebody, like flattering somebody, after a while the person begins to believe that it is so. Now this is a danger. If you are on a spiritual path, otherwise it's okay. But it's for 100 days, if every morning somebody gets up and says, "You're God," then on the 101st day, you might really think you're God. So Babaji gave me this warning just before I left him, when he asked me to go back to the plains. He said, it doesn't matter what people think about you, because now you're going, you have something in you which may attract people. But it's all right what they think about you. You can't change that, because people can form any opinion about it. The moment you start believing what they think about you, you're sunk. He said, watch out carefully. So I'm absolutely careful about this. Some people really, because especially in India, it's a common thing to praise. Nobody likes criticism. So I think when you're criticized, then it's actually somebody is pointing out, right or wrong, that you're not okay. There's something wrong, and that's where you can correct yourself, right? So we should be open to that, I think, personally, because then otherwise we are stuck. The word used is stuti, ninda. Stuti is praise and ninda is blame. So keep everything. This is from the Gita. It says, stuti, the Mauni is one who considers stuti and ninda as one, because he is not dependent on that. Sorry.
No, I think that there are two issues. One is that's an exercise in non-attachment, either seeking praise or seeking blame, but treating everything as one and not getting lost in either. I think the aspect, which in some ways I think you've alluded to, is at least in my own limited experience, I have not met an enlightened person. I've met people who approximate that. And of course, as soon as someone tells you they're enlightened, you need to turn around and run as fast as you can. I think sometimes in the other direction.
On this context, my daughter called me up day before yesterday and asked me, "This word enlightened used so often, Papa, but are you enlightened? Some people said you're enlightened." I said, "Sorry, you have to find out for yourself because I don't think I am." She said, "No, but this can't be." But I saw it in one of the videos that somebody said about enlightenment, and they said, "You fit the picture," and you didn't say a word. I said, "I didn't say a word because I couldn't say a word." Not, so you can't say, I mean, these things, and it's difficult to define this enlightenment thing. How can we define? What is it to be defined?
Well,
I don't know. Personally, I can't define this. The moment you start defining it, then you're moving away, I think.
Well, I think perhaps that you become enlightened when you disappear into the void. Because then there is, in some ways, emptiness, but in some ways, everything.
Yeah, yeah. But then it can't be translated into ordinary words. I mean, if something like that happens, it's difficult to say what happened. Words fail.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. Yeah.
It's failed because it needs nothing, no support. I was also fortunate to have a small dialogue with the Dalai Lama. I think it was there on the YouTube many years ago. Before I started this walk in India, I met His Holiness in Delhi. So we were discussing this about the shunyata of the Buddhists and in fact, I didn't want, after 10 minutes I said, I think I should move, there are lots of people. He said, there's nobody here, sit down. So, like a normal, then we discussed and I said, the Upanishads say that the truth is that which even the mind cannot reach. He said, no, wait a minute. It probably means the mind cannot define. Can't be the mind. If the mind can't reach that, what is it to me? It's there and I'm here and it's finished. So I said, perhaps it means not the ordinary mind. I said, there, I can understand that. But, and then we were discussing and he said to me something which really struck me. He said, he met the Panchen Lama after many years, 25 years or so, in the Chinese jail and he was let off. And then they were talking to each other and he said to him, at any time during this 25 years, did you have fear? Did you fear anything? So he said, I was myself quite surprised with the answer. He said, yes, I had this fear 3 times during this period when I was under arrest in the Chinese prisons. I said, what was the fear? He said, I feared that I might end up hating these guys. This is, it was like for a second I just kept quiet. I didn't know what to say. And then he himself tapped me on my shoulder and said, hey, wake up.
You were so enthralled by what he was saying.
Yeah, because can you imagine somebody being tortured day in and day out, and his fear is that he wouldn't end up hating the other guy?
Yes, in fact, actually I had a similar conversation with His Holiness, and in fact, in his telling of it to me, he was saying that he had tears because, again, it was a fear that he would lose his compassion. And, it shows you how I think a trained mind, it's like Nelson Mandela, when he was in prison for 27 years. When he left, he said he had no anger towards his captors. And I think being able to have that depth of love and non-judgment and acceptance, actually that is probably what approximates enlightenment. You've met a number of spiritual teachers that are fairly well known. Neem Karola
In Karoli Baba, short
Yeah.
while, very short while. Just one visit. That was in Vrindavan when I met him from a distance, and he told me to come and sit on his lap, and he gave me a rotten apple to eat. I mean, that's about it. And he kept telling everybody, this is Babaji's bacha, Babaji's boy, and that's about it. Then,
And how was the rotten apple?
it was nice. I thought it was quite nice. He pulled it out from inside that blanket which he always had. And for a second I was worried of how to eat this thing. It looked dirty and it was inside the blanket and half worm-eaten kind of. So I was holding it in my hand, wondering. Then he said, "Eat!" in Hindi, "Khao." So I ate it. And that was very short. But then I had met some other people like Chidananda, Swami Chinmayananda, twice the Dalai Lama. When I was leaving Maheshwarnath Babaji, my guru, he had wanted me to meet a couple of people and stay with them. And the last one on the list was Jiddu Krishnamurti. So I spent about a year or so, more than that, 3 years during the last part of his life, living in the headquarters of the Krishnamurti Foundation.
Is that in Ojai?
In India.
In India.
In
okay.
India, the headquarters in India, in Adyar, near the Theosophical, not inside, separate. So I think Babaji sent me to him because there was much to learn from this man. I noticed that there was something about him, just I felt he was like a shadow. I mean, he was not there. But I got many valuable. I would say he swept away many cobwebs. Then I realized why I was asked to go there. So he was the last person I met. After that, I didn't have any desire to go and meet anybody, and there was nobody on the list anyway. So I've had some very interesting. Sometimes Krishnamurti, can I say something? Sometimes Krishnamurti comes across as being a little impatient and arrogant, but really not so. Since I watched at close quarters, he was ready to admit his mistakes, which is a big thing, because who would do that at that stature? He was like gospel truth, whatever he said, people will. But he was ready to say, yeah, maybe I'm wrong. So, for instance, and he never tried to change me, or I didn't want to become a, in quotes, Krishnamurtite.
Right.
But I grasped quite a lot of things from. In one of the talks, he said that there's nothing in these books of yours, these religious books, so throw them into the sea. Okay, fine. So everybody was listening. And the third day, last day, he said he has not read any of these books. So I said, so when he came back in the evening, I was like personally attending on him. I was very young at that time and he was almost 90. So I went to him and I was giving him some oil for his knees. There was some pain in the knees, some Ayurvedic oil. I said, I want to ask you something. He said, don't bother me. Then he said, okay, what's it? So I said, sir, I think there's something wrong in this. The first day you say that you have not, there's nothing in these books, throw them into the sea. 2 days later you say that you have not read them. Now if you have not read them, how would you know there's nothing in them? It's a very simple common sense question. He said, oh, just a minute, I don't need them. I said, sir, that's a different story. You don't need them, but there may be somebody who needs them. So when you speak, people consider it like gospel truth. So I think you should be a little careful with what you say. I thought he's going to really send me out. Yeah, get out, you know nothing. You know what he said? You're right, sir. He said, I think I must be more careful about what I am saying. And I was stunned because he didn't have to say that. I was nobody.
But it's interesting because having met many spiritual leaders and having met non-spiritual leaders but profound people, many who are not educated, but who have a depth of knowing. For some people, you don't need anything. And I think for other people, they evolve by learning much. And I think that's very true. Again, getting back to what we were speaking about earlier, this ego thing of, I've had actually people say to me, because I'm an atheist, I'm a non-believer in anything, but in some ways I'm a believer in everything. And who am I to judge? But I've had people come up to me and they say, well, I see that you're close to the Dalai Lama. How is this possible that you're not a Buddhist? Or I don't know if you know Amma. I know Amma, and I'm close to her, and others. But I know nothing about there. And my statement is, because these people say, you know, I've followed this person for 20 years. I've never had a private conversation. Why is it that you can have this closeness? And I said, well, one is I'm seeking nothing. I have an open heart, and I care. And I said, if that is what you can embrace, then you've learned most of what you need to know. And but people forget that. They think it's a matter of memorizing an enormous list of dogma, which I don't think is required. That can be beneficial, but it's certainly not required. And this is, we're getting back to Krishnamurti. I think, and in some ways it's like, why are there different religious practices? Because different people need different things to fulfill their own, if you will, spiritual path.